Hey retro gamers. Today on Smashing Bricks, we take a photographic journey in Pokémon Snap for the Nintendo 64. Hey, welcome back to Smashing Bricks, a retro gaming podcast. This is episode 19. My name is Inzauto, and today I'm joined by special guest, GamesIndustry.biz editor-in-chief and your new favorite, not yet best-selling author. His new book, The Best Nonviolent Video Games, is available now. It's Mr. James Batchelor. How you doing, James?
I'm good, Eddie. How are you, sir?
Excellent. Excellent. I'm really excited to talk about this game that we have lined up for this episode. But before we get to that, maybe you'd like to introduce yourself to the audience because they may not know you.
Yeah, sure. So as Eddie says, I'm GamesIndustry.biz's editor-in-chief. So GamesIndustry.biz is a B2B publication for the video games industry. It was pitched to me when I joined it with the Financial Times of the games industry. So it's more on the business side of things. I'm a journalist. I have been a journalist for about 17 years now, always in B2B games journalism. And as you very kindly pointed out, I'm an author. I write books in my spare time. I've written a couple of fantasy novels. But then the big one that I've managed to release this year is I've been working with a publisher called Pen and Sword Books, and The Best Nonviolent Video Games is my first traditionally published book. So it's like it's on shelves in bookstores. It's a real book, you know.
Amazing, and it's exciting too because it's about something we all know and love. I really am interested in it too. I wonder how many games did you get in there?
There's 300 plus. I've kind of grouped together. I've grouped together series as one entry. So like FIFA is in there, but then FIFA's 30 plus games. But I wasn't going to do FIFA 19, FIFA 20, FIFA 21. That would just be pointless. It's 300 plus games. It's basically a book of profiles, short profiles. Each entry is just a little description of what the game's about, how it plays, maybe a little bit about how well it's done, how the developer came up with the ideas, some stories about how the games were inspired, or the stories behind the development. And the aim is to just give you a really good broad look at how varied video games can be, because video games, I think, still have this kind of reputation, or the stereotypical reputation, for just being centered around violence and combat. And you watch things like E3 and Summer Games Fest, and the vast majority of the games showcased and announced are kill all the things in as flashy a way as possible. And games are so much more than that, and I like exploring that. It's kind of based on, I do a Twitter account, Nonviolent Game of the Day, and I've been doing that on and off for about 10 years. Literally just, here's a game, title, formats, date, release year, developer, and then like a sentence kind of summing up what the game is about. Because I like exploring the different games people can be playing if they don't fancy something that just involves killing people. But scrolling through a Twitter feed to find a new favorite game is laborious. So I pitched this book to the publisher, and they very kindly gave me the chance to put it together, and I'm really quite proud of it.
Wow. It's a fantastic idea, and it's something I think we definitely need. I'm really happy that you put it together, and I can't wait to see it.
Thank you.
Yeah. Now, the game that we're talking about today actually comes from the book, right? Pokémon Snap is in there?
Yep, it's featured in there. Pokemon generally is obviously quite violent, but I kind of wanted to get an example of a non-violent Pokemon game in there, because Pokemon's like the biggest video game franchise, the biggest entertainment franchise in the world. So it's cool to kind of have it in there. So yeah, Pokemon Snap is one of the games included.
Very cool. So we'll expand on Pokemon Snap, obviously. That's what the episode's about. But something I've been starting to do with all of my new guests is ask you a few quick questions at the beginning of the episode so that everyone listening can have a little bit more of an understanding of where you're coming from with your opinions about these games, some things about you and your likes and dislikes and whatnot. So I'm going to ask you a few questions. You could just answer them right off the top of your head. All right, here we go. You ready?
Yep, go for it.
Okay. What is your favorite video game genre?
Stealth. I absolutely love stealth games.
I like it.
Thief 2 is my favorite. The Dishonored games are brilliant. They really scratch my Thief itch because Thief kind of tailed away. I really loved the 2016 Hitman series when they rebooted it. Like that is the most James Bond game that isn't a James Bond game ever. Most video games and most video game genres are very much kind of about reflexes and skill and how quickly you adapt to things on the fly and overcoming these challenges. Your challenges are just hurled at you. You overcome them. But stealth games, it's more about giving you the power. It's like, right, how are you going to get through this scenario? There are enemies there, but like usually with most games, like you're defending yourself against the enemies. Like here, they need to defend themselves from you. You are the danger. It's just I just really enjoy stealth games. They're amazing, and there's not enough of them.
Yeah, I feel like we could have a whole podcast just about this one question. All right, so how about your favorite developer or publisher?
See, favorite company overall, I have to go Nintendo. I just grew up with Nintendo. Nintendo still bring that magic. Funnily enough, today I'm in Seattle as we record this. I've just been to the Nintendo Live fan event, and that company just brings so much delight into my life. It's Nintendo.
Okay. Speaking of Nintendo, how about Super Nintendo versus Sega Genesis?
I never had either. I miss this generation. My parents were very clever, and when I said I wanted a Nintendo for Christmas, they bought me the NES, just kind of as the SNES was like getting a lot more popular. And then I had that NES until I got an N64. I think looking at it and what I know of all the games, I still think there are so many more quality and foundational titles, like really kind of formative titles on the SNES. And I'm not as familiar with any games on the Genesis that are as fondly remembered outside of the Sonic the Hedgehog games. I'm not as familiar with the Genesis and SNES.
Okay, wow, it's amazing you missed that whole generation. That was like the console war in my mind, anyway. Yeah, but we'll go to another one. How about PlayStation versus Nintendo 64?
I mean, it will not shock you at all for me to say N64. I love the PlayStation. I really respect what it did, but I adored my N64. Absolutely adored it. Yeah. That was the generation where I really got into games, and purely through the N64.
How about this one? PC versus console.
Console. I hate PCs. I really do, because consoles, particularly back in the day, you put a game in, you press the power button, and it works. PCs, you have to really work to make them work. Going back, like I said earlier, my Thief 2, my favourite game, I was given a PC by my flatmates who they basically built PCs themselves, and they took all the parts they didn't need and they built me a kind of a Franken-rig. And I could not get Thief 2 running on it for years. And I found out that what I had to do is I had to go into a .ini file and remove a semicolon. And if a single piece of punctuation prevents me from playing a game, that is not the platform for me.
Oh man, that is agonizing.
It's just painful.
Yeah, I felt the same way back in the day. I kind of switched over to PC, and like I mostly play games on Steam now. But that was only the mid 2010s that really became reliable for me. Okay, so how about your favorite console generation?
Do you know? I was thinking about this. This is one I struggled with. I think I'm going to say Switch. The thing is, like, the Nintendo generations are slightly out of sync with PlayStation and Xbox. So What generation would we say? The Switch is part of the PS4 and Xbox One generation, right? Would that be right? Yeah, because the Wii
there
was
is no
with
Nintendo console for the current gen.
No, is that right? Switch is the ultimate Nintendo console. It's got access to so many amazing games, so many I haven't played yet. And then if you then are taking the whole generation, PS4 generation, Xbox One generation, I think was still really strong. There were more kind of seminal titles from the 360 PS3 generation, but the vast majority of those got remade and put on PS4 and Xbox One. So the BioShocks, the Borderlands, Skyrim, Grand Theft Auto 5. I think that generation, I think that generation is probably my favorite in terms of the number of absolute must-play titles. Yeah, I mean, if we're going to go retro, because this is a retro gaming podcast, obviously, no, I wouldn't even say N64. I'd say GameCube. GameCube, PS2, Xbox was my favorite generation.
Okay.
Because GameCube was my favorite console of all time. Now surpassed by the Switch, but prior to the Switch, I loved my GameCube. It was so good.
Oh, wow. I love the GameCube too. Okay, here's an interesting one. What's a game or franchise that everyone seems to love but you can't stand?
Final Fantasy. I have tried so hard to get into Final Fantasy, and I just don't get it. It doesn't like me. I can't. I've tried Final Fantasy 7. I put a good 5-6 hours in it, and then I got stuck between a save point, and as soon as you come out of the save point, the only place you can go is into the battle with the weird red lion thing, and I wasn't strong enough to fight it, to beat it. So and you couldn't go back to do some grinding.
So frustrating.
I was like, I'm not restarting this game. And then the worst one was bloody Final Fantasy 15. What gets me is like that series is held up as like this incredible source of great video game storytelling. And I would love to know why, because I can't get far enough into the games. But like 15 was the nail in that coffin for me, because I watched the prequel movie, and it's like all about this setup and the collapse of the kingdom. And then you play the game, and you're basically on the bloke's stag do for the first half hour, and then he finds out that everyone in his kingdom is dead. Everyone he's ever known is dead, and they need to get to somewhere safe. And you go to the next area, and he calls one of his mate's sisters, and the conversation is like, "Hey, we're over in this hotel, over in this town over here. Oh, okay, cool. We'll come find you." Well, yeah, you better. It's like your entire world has just died, and you sound like you're making lunch plans. This is not great video game storytelling.
Oh man. How about we go the other way? Is there a game you love that everyone seems to hate?
Diblob. Not enough people love Diblob. Do you remember Diblob?
Yes.
Yeah. Great game. Really, really fun platformer where you're just painting the world. And obviously, there's challenges and objectives, and there's a sort of storyline, but it's mostly, take this completely grey level and make it all kinds of funky colours with a really cool soundtrack, and the synesthesia of it. Like every time you touch a building in a certain colour, you have a little riff on whatever instrument is represented by that colour. And they're just brilliant. They're so much fun, those games. And no one really was fussed on them, and no one bought them. And now we don't have a Diblob 3, and I am sad.
And now we don't have THQ.
And now we don't have THQ. Exactly. And that's because they didn't produce enough Diblob games. That's the real reason for THQ's to collapse.
Diblob. And I think you answered this final one. Your favorite game of all time is Thief.
Yeah, Thief 2. Thief 2 The Metal Age. It's just the perfect stealth game. It's probably really dated now, but in terms of the stealth mechanics, that is the best stealth game I've ever played. Absolutely love it.
Awesome. All right, James. Well, thanks for answering all those. That was great. Now, let's get to Pokémon Snap.
Absolutely. Let's do it.
So, Pokémon Snap is our game for this episode, but what is Pokémon Snap? I'm going to start with a little quote from the manual. One day, a talented young photographer named Todd received an interesting letter from Professor Oak, the famous Pokemon researcher. And the letter went on to ask him, hey, come to Pokemon Island and take pictures of all these Pokemon. I can't call Pokemon trainers because they're just going to want to catch them and I need to learn about them. So you're a great photographer. Come ride in this little machine I made and take pictures of these Pokemon in their natural habitat. And then I'm going to make an album and make a report and thank you. And that's the game. You ride on rails and you take pictures of Pokemon. Did I miss anything?
No, that worked. I'm now thinking about that narrative. It's like, well, why did Professor Oak not stop giving Pokemon to trainers, to 10-year-old trainers, and actually employ more photographers across the series?
I don't know. He had a good idea to get the trainers away from them, to stop them from pitting them in the combat to the death.
Because he's right. I mean, like the gotta catch 'em all, the Pokedex part of every single game is for the purposes of studying and identifying every Pokemon in the world. Why not hire photographers to do that so that these poor creatures aren't just crammed into little balls?
Yes, there are different ways to capture things in this world, like capturing an image. So that's the basis of the game. Some of the game's history: it was released in 1999 for the Nintendo 64, which was March in Japan and July in North America, but the EU did not get it until September 2000, like more than a year later, almost a year and a half almost from the Japan release. I wonder why that was. Do you have any idea why that was?
I don't know why for this specific one, but I do remember just the EU and the UK, we did have to wait a long time for certain games to come out over here.
Yeah, there was an era where that was the norm, right?
Yeah, it was, and some games would be up to a year later, particularly ones from Japan. And that was if they even came out over here. Like I remember there was actually a campaign in all the Nintendo magazines to get the first Smash Brothers released in the UK and the EU because there was a possibility that Nintendo was only going to do Japan and possibly America.
Wow, that would have been a loss. But they ended up bringing it out over there. So this game was actually also developed by HAL Laboratory, who developed Super Smash Brothers. Published by Nintendo, and producers were Satoru Iwata and Shigeru Miyamoto. And this was released between the Generation 1, red, blue, green, yellow, and Generation 2, gold, silver, crystal Pokemon games, which I've never played a single one of, by the way. And
you need to.
It actually beat... I know. I'm going to get to it. I actually just started thinking about which one to start with, but that's a whole other world of conversations to figure that out. This one beat Yellow to market in the US by a few months and followed Yellow by only a few months in the EU. And it was the first time these lovable little pocket monsters were rendered in glorious 3D and 64 entire bits of graphics. So that was kind of a big deal. I remember being excited for that, seeing them in 3D, because 3D was the bomb at that time. But this was not a Pokemon game to start, and it only became one out of the surprising success of the original Pokemon games. It was originally a 64DD title called Jack and the Beanstalk that was announced all the way back in February 1995. It was never shown to the public. No pictures or videos are out there. But when Pokemon just suddenly became a surprise hit, there were the games, then a manga, then a TV show, then they came to the US and they were a hit here. This stalled out game that was in development just was converted to a Pokemon title. And Iwata said that this switchover, when they did this, he said, I felt like that saved us.
I'm still trying to get my head around like how you make a Jack and the Beanstalk photography game. Like, was it going to be like Jack going around different courses, taking pictures of evidence of the giant, and then going up the beanstalk to take a picture of the giant so that everyone believes him? I don't understand what they were doing.
I have literally no idea. I was wondering the same thing. And my presumption is that we had a Jack and the Beanstalk game. We started making it. they said we're going to switch it to Pokemon. We switched what the game was about and continue with Pokemon. But yeah, there was apparently photography in the Jack and the Beanstalk game. There was also other stuff like with seeds and growing and using the time feature of the 64DD that they eventually wanted to move to Earthbound 64, which also never got made. In January 1999, 3 months before this game came out, it was announced that this would be a Nintendo 64 cartridge instead of a 64DD game, just like every other 64DD game. I think there were like 50 or 60 games that they said were going to be 64DD games, and ultimately the 64DD had a Japan-only release, and only 7 games came out for it. 4 of them were Mario Artist modules, and 2 of them were game expansions, so the 64DD was dead on arrival, as is well documented. But this one escaped its clutches as a Nintendo 64 game. Contemporary titles. It was released the same day as Mario Golf, a little bit before the new Tetris. Some other games that I remember, the Deep Cuts, Tonic Trouble, Hybrid Heaven, Shadow Man, Gauntlet Legends, and the venerable Superman 64 came out that summer. Pokemon Stadium came just a month after Snap in Japan, but it took a full year to come to the West, to either the US or the EU. And I don't know why that was either. You have any idea why that was?
No, again, I don't know. It was just one of those things where the game came out later. But I think it worked out better for us in terms of, you were saying earlier that, that Pokemon Snap was technically the first game that showed the Pokemon in 3D. We actually, obviously, in the UK and the EU, we got Pokemon Stadium in April 2000. We got that first. So we had this game like, here's all 150 Pokemon in 3D with the standard battling mechanics and more representative Pokemon thing. And then 6 months later, here's this actually like quite quirky, different Pokemon experience that's also in 3D, and it shows them in their natural habitat. It just it was. I don't know. I like to think that was a better way of releasing them. Like, here's the full-blown, full-generation standard battles, and then here's this quirky little spin-off that gives you something a bit different.
Yeah, thinking back, I could imagine the excitement of getting your Pokemon in 3D. If you're a Pokemon fan, you would want Pokemon, like the game system that is Pokemon, first, rather than the spin-off first. Huh, didn't think about that. Also, didn't even realize that it came out sooner in the EU. That's great information. And HAL Laboratory, as I said, was busy that year for another reason. They've just made Super Smash Brothers earlier in 1999, which was solid beginnings there. Smash Bros. And a couple Pokemon games in 3D. It didn't sell amazingly. It was the 6th best-selling Nintendo 64 game of 1999 in the US, with 1.5 million copies, which was, at that time, I think, Deese, you probably are much, much more knowledgeable about sales figures over the years than I am. 1.5 million copies in 1999. How does that sound to you? Even though it was the 6th best-selling Nintendo 64 game, that was already like winding down the Nintendo 64 lifespan.
Yeah. That's a decent sales figure, I think. I mean, it's not massive, but I'm trying to remember. I have a vague memory of hearing that GoldenEye 64 sold 8 million copies over the course of its life. So you think, like, in its first year, Pokemon Snap sold a quarter of just under a quarter of GoldenEye's lifetime sales. That's not a terrible sales figure, but it's not. I mean, it was never going to be a massive bestseller. As big as Pokemon was, this was a spin-off project for fans. Like, it was never going to be the big seller. So I think 1.5 million is reasonable.
Okay, it's hard to tell because as we go through as a retro gaming podcast, I'm looking at games in like 1985, and if they sell 1.5 million, it's like, oh my god! But now, if you look at 2023, 1.5 million, and you're out of business. Maybe, I don't know if that's true. But it's like not a big number.
there are indie developers who would love to sell 1.5 million, but no, like
but not Nintendo.
No, something of a larger IP, 1.5 million isn't quite enough. I mean, 1.5 million is like launch sales. But I think I wonder if it combines with the fact that this was, as you were about to say, sorry, the most rented game throughout most of October and November and part of November in the US. The fact that it's so short, we'll get into this in the full discussion, but like it is very much a rental title. You can rent it in a weekend and have completed the game. So that alone would have impacted sales, I think.
Yeah, probably. That was something that in older generations of gaming, they actively fought against, like the rental market. How do we develop our games so that people can't just beat our game and they have to buy it, usually by making it stupidly hard. But by this time, that wasn't really like the modus operandi of development anymore.
It would have been different, like, GoldenEye. I don't know why I keep going back to GoldenEye, but it's just that, iconic Nintendo title. But GoldenEye, the reason it sold so well, or one of the reasons it sold so well, was the multiplayer. And it's because people would rent it out for a weekend, but then they'd want it more. So, and you maybe keep renting it over and over again, but in the end, people would have just bought it. Whereas Pokemon Snap doesn't have that replayability. I mean, a case in point, I remember renting it. I remember renting it from Blockbuster, unlocking all the levels and getting all the Pokemon, or most of the Pokemon, within 2 days. And then obviously I never needed to buy it. So, I'm not going to be the only one who went through that scenario.
Yeah, probably hundreds of thousands of people did that. And there was speaking of Blockbuster, there was a cool Blockbuster promotion where they had these machines. They were like big blue boxes, probably with just a Nintendo 64 mounted inside behind the front plate and a TV and a controller sticking out. And you plug your cartridge in, or their cartridge that you just rented before giving it back to them. And you buy a little sticker paper, and in the game, there's a menu option for making stickers, and it'll print out stickers of your photos. And
that's really cool.
I never did
I don't remember if we had that
thing
here. I don't remember if we had that in the UK. But
I didn't even know you had
cool.
Blockbuster.
Oh yeah, we had Blockbuster. Yeah, absolutely. But
I was gonna ask, do you guys have Blockbuster? Because I know that we do. And in Japan, it was a store called Lawson, I think, that did the same thing. It did win one award that I could find, and that was the Console Children's/Family Title of the Year at the Interactive Achievement Awards, which are now known as the DICE Awards. So it won that, and it got about 77% in all of its review scoring, as noted by Metacritic. EGM gave it an 8.25 average across their different reviewers. Famitsu gave it a 33 out of 40. GamePro gave it 4 out of 5. GameSpot 8 out of 10. IGN 7.8 out of 10. Nintendo Power 8.7 out of 10. Official Nintendo Magazine 85%. So fairly well reviewed. And as far as how it lasted throughout the years, Pokemon obviously has an incredible enduring legacy, and a grand total of 76 is the number that I found, titles. But Pokemon Snap has just one sequel, and new Pokemon Snap was released in 2021 for the Nintendo Switch. So it is somewhat recent. And this original Nintendo 64 game was re-released on the Virtual Consoles for the Wii and the Wii U, and then Switch Online in 2007, 2016, and 2022. Do you know of many other photographic games? I only knew of Africa with a K on PS3 in 2008, and another one called Wild Earth on PC that I actually did not play in 2006 on PC.
I've been trying to think about this because, it feels like something that should be more prominent. Even if not in the main game space, you'd think indies would have made a ton of photography games. I feel like feel like there's an indie nature photography game out there, but I couldn't tell you the name, and I couldn't 100% say it's not something I've just imagined. There's the is it Fatal Frame, the horror series? Those are technically photography games, and you're photographing ghosts, but it's not as wholesome as Pokemon Snap. So I don't. That was one thing when going back and replaying this. This did make me think, like, why are there not more games like this?
Yeah, I feel like I thought that the first time I played it and the last time I played it. Which we can get into right now. Our prior relationships with the game. You said a little bit about renting it. Is there anything else? Any other particular stories about it? Or your experience back then? What you thought of it back then?
So, I remember this one. Not necessarily fondly. I was, the year is 2000. I'm really into Pokemon at this stage because it's finally come over to the UK. Like I say, we finally got Pokemon Stadium in April 2000. I never had a Game Boy. So Pokemon Stadium was the way for me to finally play Pokemon, the actual, Pokemon Red I had. Because it came with a transfer pack you could then use to play, kind of like in the old Super Game Boy. You use it to play Pokemon games on the TV. So I played the entirety of Pokemon Red, cross-legged in front of my TV, in front of the TV in my family's dining room, and I really got into Pokemon. So I was hyped up for the franchise at this point. I was reading a magazine called N64 magazine, which we used to have here in the UK, cover to cover every month. That was my Bible, and they were getting really excited for Pokemon Snap. And they reviewed it. They gave it 90%. And I was like, wow, this must be amazing. I'm really into Pokemon. I really enjoy Pokemon Stadium. I bet I'm going to love Pokemon Snap. So I used some pocket money and I rented it from Blockbuster because I must have been short. I must obviously not have been able to buy it outright. And I remember playing it and actually being disappointed because back then it was all about like trying to get to the end of the game, and completing games that you own. And you can complete this one in like 5 or 6 hours. And I mean, and now on this replay, like fully complete. I think when I rented it from Blockbuster, I viewed in my head completing it as unlocking all the levels and getting to the credits. And you can do that within 4 hours. And I remember thinking, how did this get 90% in my N64 magazine if you can complete it in 4 hours and it's a £50 game or a £40 game? That's ridiculous. I think I'd finished it within like the first day or so of my rental. I think you rented games for a week or maybe a weekend, and I just didn't bother playing it again until I gave it back. And so I remember being disgusted. So yeah, a little bit. So I was really intrigued to your suggestion of going replaying this one again. I was intrigued, right, well, now that I'm older and in theory wiser, do I appreciate it a bit more? And we'll get into that. But yeah, my memory of this is being disappointed that here's this really highly rated game in a series I'm really now excited about, and 4 hours later it's over.
Yeah, I feel like the dollars per hour mindset about video games was really big back then. Okay, so my history with the game is I have like such fond memories about this game. I think I rented it also, but I also think I may have owned it. I don't have any of my Nintendo 64 stuff anymore. But I played it a lot. I played through. I tried to get everything as much as I could. I really played through a lot of this game. And actually now I'm a photographer, but then I wasn't. So maybe that was in me, that joy of photography was already there and I just hadn't realized it yet. And I was realizing it through Pokemon Snap. And I played it a lot. I eventually got the guide, which I posted a video running through the guide recently as we were replaying this. And I never got to use it because I got the guide after I had already pretty much exhausted everything I wanted to do with the game. And I've just had this guide now still, whatever this is, 30 years later, sitting on my shelf with my old gaming mags. But I had a lot of fun with this game back then. I remember really loving it and I was super excited to get back into it. And I was really interested when new Pokemon Snap was announced, but I don't play as many new video games anymore, so I never got a chance to try that one. But this one, yeah, this one was, I had big memories of it. Not specific memories, but big memories. And going back and playing through, I was like, oh yeah, I remember all of this, like vividly doing all these things. So that's it for me. But so how about now? Like now that we went through it again, what did we find out?
I think looking back, this game is very much of its time.
Mm-hmm.
It relied heavily, I think, on the fact that this is the first time you're seeing Pokemon rendered in 3D rather than the little
Mm-hmm.
8-bit sprites. And that makes more sense. Like, I genuinely didn't know that that Snap came out before Stadium in other territories. I genuinely didn't realize that. So now that makes even more sense. Like, wow, this is the first time you're seeing. I think it's 63 Pokemon are in the game.
Mm-hmm.
This is the first time you've seen 63 of the most familiar Pokemon like in 3D. That's a big deal. I'm watching it, playing it this time round, and looking, very kind of N64 era graphics, and I'm looking at it and like with my 2023 eyes, and going like, obviously this doesn't look great now, but I remember that this sort of thing was a big deal. This was huge. Like seeing Pokemon like this was amazing. The problem now is we've seen thousands of Pokemon, well over 1,000 Pokemon now in 3D rendered better. So the central hook of this being that you get to see Pokemon in 3D and in their natural environment and so forth. I don't think that's enough to build a game around anymore.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, it's a game very much of its time. It's dated, but I do look at it and think, well, why was there not a Pokemon Snap for each generation? Why was there not a Pokemon Snap Johto and a Pokemon Snap, Hoenn? That would have been quite cool.
Oh yeah, that would be cool. Yeah, it is funny how like it just kind of disappeared. But also it's interesting you say like it relied all on seeing these Pokemon in 3D because I mean, what is photography? The game is just looking at creatures in the wild. Like that's what the game is. We described it a little bit in the beginning and there's more to it than what we talked about, but not much more. You literally have 7 levels. You sit in a car on rails. You don't see the car or anything. You're just a first person view. You have essentially a target reticle on the screen. Like, it's just a camera viewfinder. And as you drive, Pokemon are there. To your right is a Pikachu. To your left is a Psyduck. And you just turn, aim, hold a button to aim, and another button to shoot. And that's the whole game. And you're trying to score points for getting the best shots. So it has elements of first person shooters, the skill of aiming and firing, but it's just looking and hoping you catch the right shot or you get a good glimpse. So yeah, it is all about looking at them in 3D. And I remember back then thinking it was amazing looking. And even now I find it like very charming. But I also haven't been a Pokemon fan.
It is absolutely still charming now when you look at it. I still think this game has shortcomings and frustrations. But this time round, I think I did appreciate the charm and the structure of it a lot more than I did in 2000, in the year 2000. Like, my dollars per hour value thing is completely different. Like, and honestly, I appreciated just having a nice short game.
Yeah.
So it's a very relaxing experience. It's completely different to all the other Pokemon games where it's Pokemon's not the most stressful, franchise to be involved with, but the fact that this is a lot more relaxed, a lot more chilled out, like I really liked it. Like you say, like obviously like the car goes through the levels. It feels a little bit more like a theme park than a natural environment. It feels very much kind of like a Disneyland ride because all the characters are obviously in the same place doing the same actions at the same time each time round. It's like the animatronics on Pirates of the Caribbean, that sort of thing.
Yeah.
it's a Pokemon theme park ride, but a fun and satisfying one.
Yeah, I didn't think about it that way. It's like they're not even real because each time you go there, it's literally the same thing.
It's a game where you look at it, it's like there's definitely the foundation for something better here. And as I say, I'm kind of ashamed that they didn't increase it. This game, honestly, the biggest takeaway I had from playing this game this time around is I really want to try a new Pokemon Snap now. Because I imagine/assume so much has advanced. This feels, when you're playing this in 2023, knowing that there's a new Pokemon Snap, this feels like a prototype. This feels like what if we had a game that was about photographing Pokemon? Because the Pokemon and the creatures are all in the same places every single time, and there's certain things you can do to change what they're doing to either get them close. So you can throw food to attract them, and that might bring them closer to each other, so you can get them into a different shot and different pose. Or you can bring them if you can attract them to certain spots, they will. I think the Pikachu in the first level, if you can lead him with the apples to the surfboard, he will stand on it and surf. Pretend to surf, and you get surfing Pikachu. If you attract a Slowpoke to a particular spot in the river level, he'll dip his tail into the water and become a Slowbro because he's got the weird spiky shell thing on his bottom. And there's almost like a puzzle solving element to that, to try and work out how to get more stuff out. And that again is really quite fun, but equally feels like it could be better because there's limits to that interaction. It's not like there's I don't know, a dozen or so Pokemon per level. It's not like every single one of those has something cool that you can get them to unlock or do. There really is quite a specific circumstances where throwing apples or throwing a Pestiball or playing the Pokemon flute. There's not as much room for experimentation. There is some room for experimentation, but it's all very kind of designer defined puzzles, rather than you experimenting and seeing what type of poses and scenarios you can create to line up interesting photos.
Yeah. I mean, I agree with that completely. I found that those moments where you had to use those three, you get the three tools, right? The food, the annoying ball, and the whistle, and using those was the best part of the game because it was exciting. There was discovery there was the experimentation, there was exploration of the space and of what you were able to do as an agent in the world, and I loved that part. But if it were more, if every Pokemon had something you could do to lead them somewhere special, if they had more actions programmed in, it's limited by, it's on a Nintendo 64 cartridge, so it's not like the most epic volume of video game data that you have at your fingertips here. And actually, that was another thing about the difference between Pokemon Snap and Stadium, is these Pokemon were rendered in far less detail because there had to be so many of them around, whereas Stadium had just the one-on-one, so they could make them flashier. But that there wasn't a whole lot there, and some of the space felt empty for a lot of the time too. But I do like how, as you got more of those tools, you had to go back to previous levels and then do things that you couldn't do before. And I could see people looking at that as either a positive or a negative, actually, in that it's just having to do the same thing, but you have a different tool, versus the mindset of, oh, you get to go back and look for new things to do with your new tools that you've now discovered by finding more Pokemon and getting more points.
I think I was very much in the former camp there because, yes, every time you got a new tool, there's the option, oh, brilliant, I can go back and try different things to try and find new Pokemon, etc. But again, going back to my point of the fact that there's such limits to the interactions you can have, there's limits to the experimentation you can have. It didn't feel like there was enough to warrant going back. And I found, there are technically 7 levels in this, but there's only 6 really ones that you really engage with. And I think you had to go back to them too often, or at least I found myself having to replay them too often to find extra Pokemon to get more points or whatever, to the point where like even having new mechanics is not taking away from the repetition here, because there's not enough new, just, Pokeflute, for example. I think the Pokeflute is the last one you get. And by that time, you've done, lost count of how many times I've done the beach one. Probably done the beach one like 6 or 7 times. And the Pokeflute, the only thing the Pokeflute does is, someone's going to correct me here, but the only thing the Pokeflute does on the beach level is wake up Snorlax properly so you get a full shot of him, and then maybe one other interaction. But it's like, well, by that point, I've already taken a picture of Snorlax because I've thrown a Pesterball at him. So all I'm getting is a slightly better picture of a Pokemon I've already put in the report.
A slightly better picture, maybe.
Maybe,
because Professor Oak is the worst photo critic in the history of the planet.
Oh, so bad. Like, this is the thing again. Like, and this is the limitations of the hardware and limitations of their knowledge of programming. Like Professor, now that you've brought this up, Professor Oak's is Oak's judging. So you get points for the pose the Pokemon is in. If they're just standing there, it's a bit boring. The size, so how close they are to the camera, which
but not
isn't
too close.
in your control either. But not too close. But but that's not in your control either, because you're on rails. Like, I could not get a decent sized picture of Lapras, because if I'm on a railway track that's a good several meters away from the shoreline, and the Lapras is well out to sea, obviously I'm not, because the zoom, it's not like they give you more lenses so you can get a better zoom.
That would be a great addition.
It's going to be, that would be a great addition. Obviously, it's going to be a small picture, so you don't get many points there. You get points for if the Pokemon is in the middle of the frame, but the controls aren't precise enough for you to always guarantee that. And then there's like hidden bonus points and stuff for like if it's if the Pokemon's in a certain pose, if it's a if there's more than one Pokemon in there, like and there's no indication as to how you get those. And this is back in the day when there wasn't really the internet. There wasn't people writing guides and stuff.
You needed a magazine or GameFAQs.com.
Yeah, exactly. And it was frustrating. And like I said, going back to the controls briefly there, you said earlier at the start, like, because it's first person, it's all about kind of sort of using your first person shooting skills to do things. Like, I didn't feel like I had enough precision in aiming as you would in a first person shooter. Like, first person shooters tend to be quite fluid, quite fast in terms of how you can aim. Moving the reticule around the screen is so slow, and kind of needs like a sensitivity slider in the options menu, so you can turn around a bit faster. And yes, you can like flick the stick so you suddenly change like 90 or 180 degrees, and you can suddenly flick around, but you physically move the camera very slowly compared to the 0-1 vehicle that you're in, which is moving really fast. And then some of the Pokemon are moving really fast. And this may just be me, but I am convinced there were, and I'm playing the Nintendo Switch Online version, so I don't know if this is present in the N64 original. I swear there is a little bit of lag between when you press A to shoot, as in take a picture, and when it actually takes the picture. Because I don't have the best reflexes in gaming, but there were so many points where I'd hit A as soon as the little dot goes red to indicate there's a Pokemon in the photo, or in the shot, and I'd hit A the second it went red, and then you'd get the photo back at the end of the level, and the Pokemon was already off screen, and or at least
a little off center.
Yeah, at least a little off, and it's like so. To have this game that's built around judging, Professor Oak judging how good your photos are, when that is so not in it's so out of your control, so much more out of your control than it should be. I found that quite frustrating.
Yeah, I would say that what am I trying to say? I agree. I agree with you. I feel like there was definitely a disconnect between what I felt I should be able to do and what I was able to do with the controls.
Yeah.
Yeah. You were talking about how you you can't control how close you are to the Pokemon, yet you're judged on how close you are to the Pokemon. And only toward the very end do you get one thing that could allow you to get a little bit closer, and that's the speed up for the vehicle, so you can get further down the same track faster, so maybe you'll be closer as they move around in a certain way. But again, by that time, you're coming back to take pictures of Pokemon that you've already seen, 10 times. And this also ties in with Oak's judgment in that you might get a better picture, but it's not rated better because of the specific rubric. And even if I get like an aesthetically nice picture, it's not rated well by Oak because like I got it off center with like some background and they're like in the foreground, but I cut off like their one earlobe, so now it's not a good photo. And it gets like 100 points when you can get up to like 5,000 points for a photo or more. And that's a little frustrating.
I know there was also a weird thing of like, occasionally I would get a photo that, as you say, like, it's aesthetically pleasing. You've got a really clear shot of the Pokemon. All right, it's not quite as close to the camera, but it's very distinctly a Bulbasaur or a whatever. And then you'll take another one on another run. And yes, it's closer. Yes, it's ticked all the boxes and got more points. I didn't think it was a better photo, but because it got more points, he then just automatically removes your previous photo. Like if you take a picture that is worse than the one you've already got, it gives you the option which one do you want to keep. But if you get one that he deems better, and we've already called into question his judgment, if you get one that's what he deems better, he will remove the one that you previously took and were proud of. Which just, again, seems like a
What if I wanted to get a sticker at Blockbuster with that picture?
Exactly.
Oh, man. They have the album function. At the end of the level, you get to choose which pictures you want to give to Professor Oak. And you get to choose if you want to add any pictures to like your personal album, which it's kind of like a protection for photos that you like. But you have to know to do that every time. And if you get into a situation like you just said, oops, there it goes. Did you get any photos this time that you really liked?
Yeah, I got quite a few that I was quite chuffed with. I got a very nice one of a Dragonite that was just kind of like swooping through and waving. I got a really good one of the Charizard. When you knock the Charmeleon into the lava pool and it becomes a Charizard, I got quite a good one of that drawing. So I was quite chuffed with some of the photos I got. Maybe didn't you make as much use of the album functionality. I have to say, again, going back to the repetition of the game, by the time you get to the end, or by the time you've done all the courses at least twice, I found myself like not to take too many photos because the going through all the photos at the end for Professor Oak's check, like, you've got up to 60 photos you can take, and I would make sure I didn't take more than, say, 20, because scrolling through 30 or 40 photos, 6 images at a time. The one thing I will say there is it knows to group Pokemon. Like, when you're actually looking at an individual photo, it knows to group the photos of that same Pokemon together. So if you've taken pictures of, say, a Pikachu at the start of the track and then loads of ones at the end of the track, you can just go left and right between the Pikachu photos and pick the one you think is the best. But even so, like, reviewing your photos, particularly if you've took loads of them, gets quite repetitive as a task. And like, particularly because if you've just gone snap happy, it's like, well, do you know what? This is so imprecise. I'm just going to spam the shoot button until I get a decent one. Trying to find the one that is just millimeters better than the other one that you took.
Yeah.
It just got quite frustrating.
Yeah, I found that it wasn't really worth it to go back and try to get like a slightly better photo. And I went Speaking of like trying to take a certain number of photos, I went the other way at a certain point where I had to get like a particular photo for a level. I would go until I got that photo and then I would just blast the shutter button until I hit 60 so the level would end automatically and I didn't have to wait for the 01 to get to the exit.
Oh, that's genius. I never thought of that. That was where the point where I was genuinely glad for the speed up button, because I would just take the photo I need and then just race to the end of the level. I tell you what, the speed up button's handy, particularly towards the end. I think they know. I think they added that at the point that they knew people would be just going through the levels to get one, maybe two Pokemon that they've missed, and specifically wanting to get to specific points rather than going through the whole level. But then if they could add a speed up button, why the hell wasn't there a break? Like, I know there's little tricks you can do. Like, if you look behind, the 01 moves slowly, or slower. But then the way the Pokemon are positioned are almost always on the assumption that you are looking ahead or to the side. That's where they are positioned for you to get the most photo. Because when you're looking behind, they're just not at the right angle. And then there's sometimes you can do things like you can, I think on the river level, for example, the tunnel level, you knock down like a Metapod or a Kakuna. And if a Pokemon's in your way, like in the middle of the track, if you throw like an apple at it or a Pestiball, it will knock it out for a little bit. And that kind of, it's almost a bug. It stops you in your place because the game can't work out, well, hang on, this is meant to be moving on rails and there's a thing in the way, so I can't move just yet. Like, that's the only way I could get is it the Scyther? Yeah, Scyther in the beach level, where basically, like, there's something running around in the tall grass. You can see little leaves coming out and so forth. And the best way to get a Scyther, other than you have to, like, just spam the grass with Pestiballs and hope and cross your fingers. So many. And hope and cross your fingers that you get the damn thing and he pops out and take a picture. It's easier if there's a point where a Meowth chases a Pidgey across the track. If you hit him with a Pestiball, he's knocked out and he falls down the middle of the track. So you then you stop because the car can't go past him. But then you have to keep on knocking him out to keep then spamming that. And it's just... the fact that you're having to really kind of work around the game's frustrations, it doesn't feel like you're being clever. It feels like you're actually having to work around shortcomings and just frustrations that the developers left in.
Yeah, it's like a prototype, like you said.
Yeah, it does. It feels like a proof of concept. I sound very negative about it. I did enjoy my time with it overall. I got some photos I really enjoyed. I liked the variety of courses. I liked seeing Pokemon in the natural environment and seeing some of the interactions between them. The Meowth chasing the Pidgey, and then later on the Pidgey uses a gust attack against Meowth as revenge. Knocking a Squirtle to knock a Mankey off a mountain, and then knocking that Mankey so he falls and opens a button to open up the next course. Like, there were some good fun moments. So it was fun. I'd like to say I came away from this all the way through thinking I really should try new Pokemon Snap, because I bet there is so much more in this.
Yeah, literally the same. I when I was done, I said, you have to play new Pokemon Snap, because it's probably like 5 times better than this game, which you have a fondness for already. One thing I really liked was the very last level where you had to get a picture of Mew, who was the super rare Pokemon at the time, right? I'm not a big Pokemon aficionado again, but like, it was really special to see Mew at the end.
Yeah.
And you had to like do basically a boss battle with Mew, because he was in this bubble and you had to hit him with Pester Balls to crack the bubble and then do something else to get a picture of him. And I thought that was cool. And it was a whole level just to get a picture of Mew. And I thought that was really cool.
Yeah, I think I was underwhelmed by the time I unlocked that. And to be fair, this time round, I was tired of it by the time I unlocked that. I remember that being the special course I unlocked back in 2000 when I rented this from Blockbuster. And yeah, at the time, it's like, oh my God, it's Mew. It's the 151st Pokemon, the secret one that you can't catch in the game. You have to trade at events. So like, yeah, it was a big deal back at the time. But now you're like, That's it. That's my reward for suffering the first 6 levels over and over again is I get to go over a cloud and throw things at a Mew and get one picture of a Mew, and that's it. That's the grand finale, is it?
I think it would be much more effective if there were multiples of those types of, let's call them photographic challenges, interspersed in a longer and more diversified game.
Yeah.
Okay. So here we are at the end, and it sounds like we've kind of tipped our hand a little bit here, but the whole point really is to go back and play these games that we may or may not have played in the past and see how they hold up and whether they're worth revisiting or if anyone else should also go and revisit them, aka were they a smash or more of a brick. So what would you say ultimately for Pokemon Snap on Nintendo 64?
I'm sorry, I feel like it's a brick. I feel like it's a good brick. It's an ambitious brick. It was trying, and at the time, it was really interesting to see Pokemon in 3D and see them in a natural habitat and actually try and do something different other than battling and try to capture them, in the traditional sense, not the photography sense. Like so, I've written both in the year 2000 and in 2023. I wanted to love this game, and I had a lot more fun with it this time round. I know I sound like I haven't, but I did enjoy it a lot more this time round. But it's a brick. My only hope is it's a brick that has led to a smashing sequel in New Pokemon Snap. I'm gonna have to track that down and see if it's any good.
Yeah. For me, it's I remember loving this game back then. This time around, I had fun with it. It's charming. I enjoyed going through and doing the different things to get the special interactions. But I don't think it's that great of a game. I think it's a nostalgia hit. I think it's a special interest game for someone who likes photography. I think it has some charm. It brings a little bit of joy, but I don't think it's necessarily worth playing. So I'm gonna say brick also. But maybe you want to check out. Maybe you want to play this game. Sure, if you haven't played it and you want to play it, any of this sounds interesting to you, go ahead play it. But I'm not gonna call it a smash and say that you have to play it. And I would probably suggest getting the new one and trying that instead, because it seems like it's just the better updated version.
It's on the Nintendo Switch Online expansion pack. So if you've got the upper tier of Switch Online and you've got the N64 app, it's the sort of game that it's great to try for a weekend. And if you're a Pokemon fan and you want to see how it was and you just want to, it's the perfect sort of subscription game. It's not one you want to go out and spend money on. And you're not going to track down an N64 and a copy of this and have an amazing time. But if you've got access to the subscription, it's worth trying just see what you think. And if you enjoy it, good for you. And maybe try new Pokemon Snap. But it's not one to avoid completely, but it is one to it's not one to go out of your way to play.
Yeah. I'm not going to put my name and my reputation on saying go play this. That's for sure. Okay, so Pokemon Snap is a brick. Bricks from both of us. And isn't what we would say go out and get in 2023 and beyond. That's it for that one. So that wraps up the episode. Thank you so much for listening, everyone, and playing along if you did. And thanks, James. Thanks for coming and being on the show with me today. It was great. Great having you. I loved all your insight.
Thank you so much for the invitation. It's been really good fun.
Awesome. You're welcome. And where should the listeners go to look for you, your work, your book, etc.?
So my work is all at GamesIndustry.biz. If you're interested in the kind of the business of video games and you want to learn more about that, definitely check that out. I am on various social media platforms as James_Batchelor. I'm most active on Twitter still because I just haven't got in the habit of not using that place. But I'm also on Blue Sky and Mastodon. On my website, my author website for my books is jamesbatchelor.me. That's where you'll find links to buy my fantasy novels, but obviously more importantly, the best non-violent video games from pen and sword.
Wonderful. So you can go find James at all those places, and particularly if you're interested in the book, the link will be in the show notes of this episode. And look for Smashing Bricks on your favorite podcasting platform. You're probably listening to it right now, where you can leave us a generous and helpful 5-star rating and review for absolutely free. But if you want to go above and beyond that and support the show monetarily while getting some fun perks, head over to patreon.com/smashingbricks and become a patron for as little as $1 a month. Or you can even jump in at the awesome Fireflower tier of $5 a month, and you'll have some exciting input into the show via the upcoming Patreon Picks episodes, where you get to decide the specific game that we play on an episode. Or you can do $20 for bonus content and continued recognition as one of our bigger supporters, or even $75 to earn yourself a special co-host appearance on the show. And you can even go beyond, you can do $1 million a month if you want to. One of the most important perks, though, is for everyone, and that is getting us to bi-weekly episodes instead of monthly. And once we have enough support, everyone will get twice the number of Smashing Bricks episodes. Again, that's patreon.com/smashingbricks. We're also on Instagram and YouTube at Smashing Bricks, Facebook and Twitch at Smashing Bricks Podcast, and X, aka Twitter, at Smashing_Bricks, because I didn't get the name in time and there was a character limit. So you can find those links in the episode description at our Linktree, which is linktr.ee/smashingbricks. To chat directly and in a cozier environment, join our Discord server, which is also linked there, and that'll give you a place to leave commentary about upcoming and past games, gaming in general, food, hobbies, news, or anything you could think of. You can suggest games to be played for the podcast there, and follow the link to the newly renamed Smashing Bricks playlist to either evangelize games already listed or make brand new recommendations of your own. Discord is the best place for all of that, but if that's not your cup of tea, you can always reach me at smashingbrickspodcast@gmail.com. As for next episode, I will be joined by Peter Willington of Auroch Digital and the Staying In podcast to play and discuss another HAL Laboratory game, coincidentally, from 1990, a Japan and PAL only Famicom/Nintendo Entertainment System release, New Ghostbusters 2. So go get your hands on a copy of that, play along, send in your thoughts, and join us next time on Smashing Bricks. Whew! I'm still Eddie Inzauto. That is James Batchelor. And until then, may the nostalgia be with you.